Hi, my name is Lena Bailey. I'm 32, and I used to be an accountant. My last job was at a firm that was run by a bunch of older men who valued hard work and were displeased by excuses. Whitman and Associates paid well, but with the economy the way it was, things started to get tight for me in my one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Boston. The biggest culprit was my rent. My place was not worth $2,100 a month, but it was still cheaper than everywhere else. My concerns about money changed one Saturday night when I was 29 after I bought a lottery ticket on a whim. Before we start the story, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to help out the channel. This week, leave a yellow book emoji and comment where you're hearing my story. I'm always fascinated by how widespread we are in this world. Just under my rent were my parents. Payday was on the 1st and 15th of the month, and that was when Mom and Dad visited, needing one thing or another, and it was usually money. Several times, Mom would pull out a bill and, while talking to me about some odd thing or another, she'd slide it across the table to me. I'd look at it, then at the worry on their faces, and pay the bill. It drove me insane to see them coming, but they are my parents, with jobs, savings, pensions, side work. Whenever I complained or mentioned their savings, they'd say they liked to leave it alone because their health wasn't guaranteed, and that I should be grateful that they did, because their will specifies that whatever they were able to save will be split between me and my brother, Wesley. I'd look in the light green eyes of Peter and Beth Bailey with a smirk, knowing the split would be something like 70/30ths in Wes' favor. He would need the money because by the time he was 28, my little brother had 6 kids by 4 women under the age of 8. The twins, made with an Asian woman he was only aiming to have a one-night stand with, were 6 months old when they went to live with their maternal grandmother because the baby's mother decided she wasn't ready to be a parent, and Wes didn't want the day-to-day responsibility either. Child support struck like clockwork, and I always had to refrain from telling him to get a vasectomy whenever he knocked on my door for a few bucks to see him through the month. That was twice a month, too. My friends liked to comment on how handsome my brother was, and all I could do was take their word for it. His smooth beige skin and the straight white teeth behind his wide smile are what got to them the most, they claimed, and I'd immediately beg them to shut up. I just knew that their next words were going to be detailed descriptions of sex with him, which happened in the past, and I never wanted to hear that shit again. On a whim, I bought a lottery ticket. I was anticipating my cycle and craving sweets. I was in line at the crowded store after work for a Hershey with almonds, maybe a Snickers too, when the lady in front of me ranted about not wanting the extra printed ticket. I wanted 6 quick picks, not 7. That's all I'm paying for. When she finally left, I asked for the candy, a pack of Icebreakers peppermint gum, and said I'd take the ticket as they were about to void it. I also bought a scratch-off because the clerk looked at me with pity. The morning news reported that someone had won the lottery in Massachusetts, and the winning amount was reset. One person won almost $1 billion. I didn't bother to check my ticket, believing the odds were against me, and went to work bloated and in a very bad mood. I stayed to myself the entire time I was there. I picked up the ticket from the kitchen counter and checked 2 days later, after I heard that the ticket was bought from the store where I got mine. I blinked at least twice every second when I saw the numbers matched. I frowned, believing I needed to start wearing glasses. By the time it sunk in that I'd won the lottery, my steaming cup of coffee had gone cold, and my cat had fallen asleep on the paperwork I brought home. I laughed once, and it sounded hysterical. The numbers on my laptop matched my ticket, and it all seemed surreal at first. The row of numbers looked like a prank. When my brain finally understood what was happening, I shut the laptop and put it on the second shelf of the hall closet under a stack of beach towels and an old bread maker. I sat on the steps of my apartment, where the paint flaked off like bad sunburn, listening to 3 neighbors' lawn mowers and the crowd of fans at the softball game in the park that took over the entire side across the street. A breeze made the scent of cut grass invade my nose and made my brain finally decide to work again. A secret is only as quiet as the room you keep it in, I recalled from a lesson in my college ethics class. Staring at the larkspur that filled my front garden with an abundance of purple, I decided not to tell a soul, especially my coworker Tammy, who shared gum and gossip like they were necessities of life. Definitely not my on again, Off again, whatever he was to me, who texted me late and made promises he knew he'd never keep after his even later visits, several times a week. I didn't even tell my parents, who loved me in the way a passing storm loves a window. I had no desire to pay weekly for weaves, pedicures, and manicures for Mom, and supply my dad with cigars and thousand-year-old scotch that he hints at every Christmas. I know that if I bought just one cigar, I'd be blamed if that man got lung cancer. I went to work every day, pretending I needed a paycheck like everyone else there, while that ticket sat in my safe at home. For 6 weeks, the ticket played with my sanity. I finally took a day off from my job and went on nervous legs to the lottery office, where I turned in the ticket with Mira Ulrich, my attorney. After congratulations and best wishes and a lot of other yapping and signing this and that, the officer asked if I knew how I wanted to go public with the win. "Do I have to?" I squeaked. She nodded. "It's good publicity for the agency. It encourages others to play and makes the payout larger. And the tax payments are an excellent resource for the coffers." I consulted with Mira, then said, "I'll do the press conference, but I don't want my name or image shown. 15 minutes, and I'm done." Mira ran out to buy me some simple shoes and jeans after I said I was wearing a casual brown dress that several had seen me in and would probably be recognized as mine. In the end, it wasn't too bad, but I did feel funny speaking through a mic that changed my voice while I sat behind a large check that was for show. I opened a new account at a financial institution recommended by my attorney, and 41 days after the press conference, the notification arrived on my phone that the money had been deposited. I chose the lump sum option and felt nothing but relief after realizing that I'd never have to worry about money again. I had to have stared at the balance for at least an hour. At first, I allowed myself only sensible luxuries. The dentist appointment I'd been postponing, a reliable used red Prius with a dent I barely noticed, and a color and cut at an exclusive high-end salon. I replaced the cat's threadbare climbing post and sent an anonymous donation to the local animal shelter, where I found Button, and signed with a name I wished had been mine once, Aloan Bay. A week later, my parents dropped by. It was the 15th. They came as they always did, unannounced and in stereo. My mother's perfume reached the door before she did, a tidal wave of gardenia and judgment. My father carried a Tupperware filled with lasagna and the kind of smile he wore when he needed to borrow money, which he often did, so there wouldn't be a bill this time. They followed me into my dining room, where I was deciding what to order for dinner. "You didn't pick up the phone," my mother said. "We thought you died." My mother would find the sting and remove it because she preferred to be the one who had put it there. "Dead people don't text you to stop calling," I said, wishing they'd just state their business and leave my home. "So your comment is null." Now, Lena, really. There's no need for that tone and attitude. My father dropped a Tupperware of lasagna on the table and hugged me one-armed, as if he were holding the other half of the hug in reserve in case he needed it later. Then he cleared a space with his forearm, so placemats and papers flew to the floor, and said, "We need to use your computer," he said, casual as weather. "Your mother's Facebook keeps asking about two-factor something. Open your phone and I'll show you how to set it up." Dad frowned as he pointed. "Is that a new computer? Looks fancy. What did that set you back?" I shook my head. "Company deal," I lied. My mother tilted her blonde head and studied my face the way a pawnbroker studies a ring. "Have you done something to your hair?" I nodded and said, "I cut it, Mom, 3 months ago." She walked around me, scrutinizing. Beth frowned at my roots and said, "No, this was a more recent visit. And you had it colored. It looks expensive. What did you pay for this, Lena?" The cat, a morbidly curious tortoiseshell named Button, jumped on the table and sniffed the lasagna. My father shooed her, and the motion made his eyes move to the open hall closet, and I silently cursed myself for leaving it open after I grabbed a clean kitchen towel. Dad could inventory a room with one sweep, cataloging leverage points. I moved so that I was between him and his view of the closet, hoping he didn't see something he would need at home. "What do you want to drink?" I asked. "I went shopping this morning, so whatever you want, I should have it." My mother followed me to the kitchen and opened the fridge. I watched as she stared inside it, her eyes wide. Next, She checked the cabinets and the small pantry, where she grabbed a bottle of red wine and glasses after getting the opener. Dad opened the wine, and as he poured, Mom said, "Someone got a bonus." Fridge, cabinets, and pantry are overfilled with food, yet, she said, looking at the screen of my new laptop. She was about to order out. "Mom, you rarely cooked after grocery shopping when we were kids. Why is it odd that I was going to do it?" Her eyes scrutinized me. Dad cleared his throat and looked toward my closet again. "Eat," I ordered. "Then we can work on your two-factor issues." As we ate the bland food, my father talked about gas prices. My mother listed neighborhood scandals like rosary beads while passing me her gas bill. After I paid it online, Dad said they needed to go and excused himself to use the bathroom before the trip home. When they left, I checked the closet. The towels were slightly askew, and my old laptop was gone. I sent them a text. "You only had to ask. Don't ever steal from me again." They didn't answer. The email alerts began 2 nights later. Odd notifications from my bank were like distant sirens. New device login attempt, password reset requested, unknown IP. I shook my head. They hadn't realized that I had already switched everything to the new computer and wiped the old one. Why were they attempting to get into my business? I changed all passwords and added another layer of locks. The attempt alerts kept coming. I shut off my phone so I wouldn't watch the numbers stack up like flapjacks. That night, I dreamt of a keypad with no numbers at all, just a blank membrane that knew the shape of my panic. I woke, thinking I was tired of numbers. When I couldn't stand the chimes and alerts anymore, I drove to the state lottery office and asked for a meeting with the agent who assisted me when I claimed my winnings. I wore a gray hoodie, and the expression I used when negotiating with plumbers and expressed that I believed someone knew about my windfall. "You're within your rights to remain anonymous," Darla Fleming said. She had the patient shoulders of a good nurse. "In this state, at least. Understand that people will guess about your blessing, but know that we only say what we're allowed. No one here leaked your info. If you want to keep your anonymity, don't tell anyone. Don't post anything. Get a trust. Keep your accounts layered." "They're not guessing," I said. "They're trying." Darla folded her hands. "Then stop using the word they. Figure out who it is, and if the leak is here, let me know. I will plug it. Stay vigilant and keep me informed." I didn't know what to do. My mind took me back to the time when my father showed me how to pry open a window when I'd locked myself out at 16, and I wondered if I had learned more than I should have about the look on his face when the latch gave. Then I thought about when my mother had told me, a dozen times in a dozen summers, that family is a kind of safety net, but she had never said who the net was for. It would have been easier if that were the end of it, the parents, the pressure, the thinness of my own breath at realizing that my own parents may not have only been trying to get in my business, but also had attempted to steal my money. And I feared the definitive proof that was the case. But deep down, 2 days later, someone knocked, almost gently, and I knew the way it sounded that it was my brother. He used to do the same thing when we were children, and he wanted me to share the good cereal I bought with my own money. Wes had always been a contradiction, generous and hungry, tender and rough. He was 28 and waited tables at the House of Pancakes in the morning and at a fancy French place at night, using what little of the language he retained in high school to pay child support for 6 kids in 3 counties, which meant he missed birthdays and sent heart emojis at midnight. He arrived at my door in a shirt that smelled faintly of syrup and hope. "I heard you came into money," he said, eyes sliding off mine. "Congratulations." "From whom?" I asked, though I knew he would never say. I shook my head. My parents must have discovered 1 a.m. how to us, and the trembling power of the word, recover. They had probably told themselves a story in which this was their salvation, not a theft. So far, all they could access was the account I used for work deposits, but I closed it 20 minutes after I submitted my resignation, which is probably why Wes was at my door. He shrugged. "People talk." "People," I said. He answered, "You know, Mom told me." We stood on the porch like 2 pieces of the same furniture set that were left out in the rain. "I'm not asking for a handout," Wes said so quickly he tripped over the word not. "I'm asking for what's fair." Scowling, I asked, "What's fair?" "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "Half," Wes continued, as if saying it that way made the math moral. "We're blood. Family money is family money. How much you win anyway?" 50 thou. If only this idiot knew. And when did you start playing the lottery, Lenny? How did he find out? I thought a moment and remembered the laptop Dad stole. Did he manage to access my emails? If he did, why didn't he tell Wesley what I won? What was up my parents' sleeves? Damn it, I shouted. Do you hear yourself? I asked, and my voice did not sound like mine. It sounded like something honed and put away and sharpened again. Do you hear what you're asking and demanding? He flushed. I'm drowning, Len. I have 6 kids to feed and clothe. I show up, I pay. I'm not asking to buy a boat. I'm asking for air. And you think stealing my lungs is the way to breathe, I said. I didn't make your kids. I didn't make your choices, and I taught you how to protect yourself well before your oldest was born. I love you, but your math is a prayer with my name penciled in. He was quiet for a long moment. A leaf skittered across the porch, catching on a nail head. If you won't help, he said softly, I'll sue. I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly wrong. On what grounds? Blood relation. He lifted his chin, rehearsed. A claim to shared fortune. Blood relation is not a legal argument, I said. How did you let your parents take you down this road? He looked so young. The cat nosed his ankle, and he couldn't help bending to scratch her, his hand going gentle, without permission. I'll see you in court, he said. I don't, he swallowed. I can't drown. After he left, I made tea and set it down without drinking it. I called my lawyer and told her everything. He's going to sue me, I finished. She laughed. For what? Wesley can file whatever papers he wants, Lena, Mira Ulrich said. The law doesn't care who shares your DNA. Your parents trying to hack your accounts is a crime, so think about what you want to do about their actions. Your brother's suit will fail, and I think if he does file, you should countersue for my fees. Nothing but the threat has happened, but it already hurts, I said. Then let's make a plan that won't add to the hurt, Mira gently suggested. We'll keep your anonymity intact during the process, and if it goes to trial, we'll ask for a closed courtroom. In the meantime, document the intrusion attempts and change your locks. The first rule is, own only what's yours. Wesley made good on his threat. The lawsuit made the local paper anyway, because someone in the clerk's office liked to send screenshots. The headlines were polite as far as headlines go, but neither listed my name nor my parents. However, Wesley's name was everywhere in the article. The court date was 3 months out. The city hummed along, oblivious to my hurt feelings. The softball games grew louder. The leaves in the park went brittle and gold. I learned how to take my own pulse with 2 fingers lightly at the base of my throat, not to feel guilty when I say no, and be the kind of person who does not apologize for refusing to be robbed. I learned that being anonymous did not mean being alone, and called up a few old friends to hang out on the weekends. I realized all of that after the animal shelter sent a postcard with a picture of a dog named Beryl, whom I had inadvertently saved. The card smelled like cheap ink and someone's gratitude. I kept it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pencil. When the day came, the courtroom felt like a school auditorium, the same battered posters about respect politely ignoring the fact that no one was looking at them. Wes sat at the plaintiff's table in a borrowed tie. He did not look at me. Our parents were in the second row, dressed as if grief had a uniform, stony and stale with righteousness. Someone had told them that endurance was a kind of virtue. No one had told them that endurance can have a victim. The judge listened. He had a face like a shed, sensible and weathered. Wes's lawyer stumbled over words like entitlement and equitable that had never been allowed to play together before. When he took the stand, Wes spoke of blood and duty and drowning, the same crap he gave me. My attorney spoke of the law. Wes went completely red at Myra's questions. Which lottery did Lena play? When did she win? How much was the ticket, and did you pay at least half and pick any numbers? How much was the payout? Did you ever consider the fact that your sister wanted to stay anonymous? His answers were, I don't know. and no. I don't know. Why does she want to hide? Because she didn't want to help her elderly parents and cash-strapped brother, who has 6 kids and a paltry income made from running food around a building for a bunch of people who don't appreciate his efforts. Mira frowned at my brother. I'm sorry, Mr. Bailey. Lena told you 6 times not to wear a condom. Wes' lawyer objected. Okay, Mira sighed. Is she the mother of either of your children? That's my sister, Wes shouted. Exactly, Mira snapped. Your sister, not your partner or spouse. Mr. Bailey, can you tell me how many times your sister has helped you financially over the years? No, Wes mumbled. More than once, she asked him. Yeah, Wes sighed. And does she help your parents? Yeah. Roughly, how many times a month? Twice, exactly. How do you know that's exact? Wes sighed in aggravation. Because they'll get money from her or have her pay a bill, then they'd give me cash. So, Mira said, walking closer to the witness stand. Your sister pays a bill for your parents and they give you the cash and you have that along with whatever she kindly gives you? Is that correct, Mr. Bailey? It is. So, why are you suing her? Because I need more. Child support is robbing me blind. Again, she's not your parent, so I can't understand why we're here today. In the end, there was nothing lyrical about the ruling, nothing that would make a decent story. The court dismissed the complaint with a paragraph so dry it nearly sparked. Biology does not confer a right to another's property. The judge encouraged us to seek reconciliation outside this forum, which is how courts say, take this mess somewhere else. Outside on the steps, photographers with no one to photograph looked briefly at us and decided our faces were not sufficiently famous. Wes stood like a lamppost. I stood like a person who had just learned to stand. I didn't want it to be like this, he said finally. I know, I said. But wanting doesn't undo doing. I am sorry, Len. Are you sorry for the suit or that you didn't win? Come on, Len. I'm sorry for the suit. Mom and Dad had me convinced that I deserved a piece of your windfall because we're blood. I can't believe I fell for their shit. I turned and watched Peter and Beth slowly moving to the parking lot, wondering if they were going to try again. I felt conflicted. They were my parents, after all, but I had given them at least half of my salary from the day I got my first job after college. And they didn't give me a chance to decide how much, let alone if I were, to gift them something for my winnings. Wes said, staring at his shoes, I quit IHOP for a job at a warehouse. Better pay and benefits. It'll be exhausting. Maybe I'll sleep in January or when the twins are 18. I wanted to tell him that martyrdom is a bad business plan. I wanted to hand him cash the way you hand someone a tissue for a nosebleed. But 3 months ago, someone had slipped a crowbar under my life, and I was still rebuilding the window. At least he did apologize, unlike our parents. I'll help. His head snapped up. I will not give you cash that will only be used for impractical things or have you guilt into giving it to Peter and Beth. Wes nodded and asked, what are you willing to do? Pay for a financial advisor, and you do what they say for a year. I'll gift you my car so that you can see your kids more. Junk that thing that starts when it feels like it. I'll put money aside for their college education that only they will be able to access. I'll pay for you to get a better place so that you can have more visits with them. They're siblings, Wes, and should know one another. His mouth worked. Something that might have become gratitude hesitated and then sat down inside him. Quiet. Okay, he said finally, and because he was still himself, he added, you're still a snob. I'm not your mother, I snorted. I did not speak to my parents. They sent texts that were prayers rewritten as invoices. They felt they were entitled to whatever I had and demanded that I continue to pay several bills for them every month. I was done. I blocked them and saved every attempt they made on my accounts in a folder labeled lessons. In the months that followed, I bought a house and renovated it with a carpenter who whistled opera and believed in closets that close with a satisfying click. He and his crew had everything completed in 5 weeks. I bought everything new for my new home and grinned big when everything was in its place. I took a sightseeing tour around Europe with a guide and 19 others, which lasted 3 months. I had never even dreamed of spending so much money on myself, and it felt good to do it. Mira was the only person who knew how to reach me, and she promised she would only do so in dire emergencies. I met 35-year-old Clinton Baxter, a celebrated heart surgeon who lived an hour away from me. When he introduced himself at our group's meet and greet dinner before the first flight, Clint revealed it was his first vacation in 12 years, and it was mandated that he take a year off because the hospital chief felt he was going to burn out because he spent more time at the hospital than he did at home. We spent the entire trip together, and in the last month, we shared hotel rooms. Totally out of character, I contacted Mira after Clinton proposed and suggested we elope with the group as our guests when we made it to France. Our lawyers hammered out a tight prenup that was emailed to us, and the last page was faxed to the hotel. We read the agreement together, signed the faxed page, had it witnessed and notarized, and faxed it back to our respective lawyers. We married on May 20th, treated everyone to a lavish dinner and cake, and spent an extra week in Paris for our honeymoon. As we flew home, we made decisions on where we'd live, when we'd try for a baby after agreeing that 3 would be enough, and how we'd spend the holidays. I felt blessed to have met him. One night, when the city smelled like rain and chowder and the park lights came on early, I sat on the back patio with Clinton and told him about the day I won the lottery and the aftermath. I also told him about the mantra I tried to live by before my dad stole my old laptop and discovered my winnings. A secret is only as quiet as the room you keep it in. Clinton smiled, and it reached his brown eyes as he said, "It turned out there was another rule, the kind the town doesn't write down because it hopes you'll already know. A boundary is only as strong as your willingness to be called cruel for keeping it." I smiled and kissed my wonderful husband. He understood. I received an email from my parents that wasn't final in tone, only in spirit. It read their actions were out of desperation because life had made them hard and hunger had made them small. They asked for forgiveness the way some people order desserts and to meet Clinton in person. They wanted to meet their new son-in-law. I posted a picture of us that was taken after we were pronounced, and several sent well wishes, even though most were saddened they weren't invited to the ceremony. My parents expressed hurt at not being there, too, but I couldn't say I was sorry. I was happy in love and didn't want critiques or attempts to talk me out of it. I knew my mind and heart and both wanted Clinton for a lifetime, and everything he said and did showed he felt the same. I printed the letter and put it in the drawer with the warranties. I did not reply. Forgiveness would come on its own schedule, if it came at all. It deserved that dignity. I now focused on Wes, who was the kind of father who showed up with crayons, candies, and discipline when needed. He told me once, washing dishes in my kitchen after dinner with Clint, that his new job was brutal, but the sensation of not drowning was new, and he found he liked air. "Funny thing," he said, holding a glass to the light to make sure it was clean. "The kids don't care about money. They will someday," I warned. "Enjoy that while it lasts." He grinned. "I'll be ready, because I've started a savings account." Wes turned to me. "I like him, Len. He's protective of you, and he smiles at every move you make and each word you utter. It's hard to find that kind of love. I'm glad you were able to." I smiled. "So am I, and to think I had to tour Europe to do so." I watched Wes dry the glass and thought about all the ways a life can be stolen and all the ways it can be built. 2 different crafts. 2 different sets of tools. Later, I got a text from Mom saying I needed to remember that they paid for college. I politely reminded her that I had given them half my paycheck for 11 years, and it was not my fault that they gave it to Wes. Clint and I chose to live in my home because it was closer to the hospital where he was on staff, and he put his condo on the market. It was expected to sell fast. When the house was quiet and the cat had decided my lap was a safe zone, I opened my laptop and looked at the numbers I still didn't plan to spend. I thought of all the rooms in my home where I could keep my secret, then how silence had saved me and how speech, carefully chosen, could save someone else. Someday, I'd forgive my parents and invite them back into my life, but only after I received a genuine apology and set boundaries. And I will remember and enforce them. I did hope it would be before I had my first child. Yesterday, the test read positive, and my husband left our home with a smile so big I didn't know how he was going to be able to talk. 12 weeks, we tell the world. he said, then kissed me. When I came up for breath, I told him to choose a good doctor and set up an appointment that he could attend with me. He vowed to be at all of them and would take time off when our child entered the world. The next afternoon, I sent another anonymous donation to the shelter. I funded 2 scholarships at the community college without putting my name anywhere near them. I wrote a check to the legal aid office that had guided 3 waiters and a cashier through the paperwork of their lives. They were substantial donations, and still, those numbers barely moved. Somewhere, a softball smacked a glove. Somewhere, a judge went home to take off his shoes. Somewhere, a woman who had won a lottery and kept her lungs, found love and built new windows, sat on a step and practiced a new rule in the language of her town. Own only what's yours. Give what you can. Guard the door without apology. And when someone you love asks for air, teach them how to breathe.